Good morning. Well, at the outset, I'd like to thank the organizer, and in particular to Mark Dumfries, for inviting me to take part of this congress, of this event. I am afraid that my speech is a little out of the topics we have been listened to this morning, because with my paper I would try to show why look at the other, only this, and why without disregard to the other our democracies collapsed. My point is is a philosophical point. Well, the starting point of my paper, the starting point for my paper lies in those events which have already been baptized as the Arab Spring, and which were recently followed with great interest, at least in my country. True enough, that interest was accompanied by somewhat haughty attitude, according to which the various Arab movements were fighting to achieve something we had had for a long time. As if the southern shore of our Mediterranean was coming of age and we were to welcome them to the grow-up world we had long been enjoying. Comments on the events were always tinged with an arrogance that I thought would be of little help to us when we really had to sit down and talk to the new government emerging from those revolts. Now, it's my belief that that sort of attitude springs from the conviction that globalization is progressing inexorably, a globalization which fused to the ideal of cosmopolitanism in order to introduce a global citizenship governed by an economic and political system more or less our own. I also feel that that sort of attitude may be dangerous for our very democratic system, which is why, in what follows, I would like to introduce a rather different cosmopolitanism from the one we are familiar with, a cosmopolitanism that has little to do with the globalization and which take the idea of global citizenship more in cultural than in political or economic terms. Well, to this end, my paper is divided into three parts. The first offers a quick sketch of the work of a forgotten author who in the 18th century was the first to publish a book inspired by the ideal of citizen of the world. The second shows how we actually understand our cosmopolitans and why we express it under the idea of economic and cultural globalization. The third part shows what is lost as a result and explains what cultural cosmopolitanism consists in, a cosmopolitanism which is founded on the notion of journey. Well, first, in 1751, Le Cosmopolite ou le Citoyen du Monde, the Cosmopolitan or the Citizen of the World, was published. Its author was Fougeray de Montbrun. This little book enjoyed a considerable readership in his day. It exerted great influence on thinkers like Diderot or Voltaire, was greeted by enthusiasm by Lessing and captivated Byron. Fougeray de Montbrun took as the starting point for the book his recollection of a series of journeys he made between 1742 and 1748. It's important to emphasize that those recollections were the starting point only. The work is not a travel book, nor an autobiography, nor a political pamphlet or collection of gallant tales, but a series of reflections strung together one after the other, which are neither profound, nor intelligent, nor even orderly in any way. Rather, they are merely thoughts which Fougeray de Montbrun used as a visiting card on the pretext of his journeys, and which allow him to make some observation and draw some conclusion regarding the character of the humanity. The lasting impression is that the cosmopolitan of the title never quite becomes a complete, well-defined or definitive citizen, but is rather another engaged in a quite disorderly, random process of self-fashioning, while all the time, and this is the point, traveling, moving from one place to another. His first port of call was England, where he was driven by a feeling of Anglomania very common at the time in France, which found in English politics a model to be imitated. And there, right at the start of his odyssey, something happens which will appear throughout his journeys. Failing to find what he was looking for, he repacks his bags and departs, in the conviction that is the same the whole world over. Disappointment and an empty purse led him back to France, where, after a few weeks, he confessed to having itchy feet and needing nothing more than to toss a feather up in the air to find out the direction of his next journey. Fougeray moves from one country to another because he likes traveling, and anywhere will do because his homeland is the world. What emerges from the cosmopolitan is that there is no more home than traveling itself, for when Montbron isn't on the move, he is absolutely nowhere, and he is himself nothing. His next journey is to Turkey and then to Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Prussia, before finally returning to England. It is worth repeating that just as his journeys are improvised and there is not important reason why he goes to any particular place, so the thoughts he gives us in the Cosmopolitan are the product of change, of the contingencies and happenstance of their author's life. An author who at no point intends to say what the world of human beings essentially is. They are nothing more than a small, disconnected notice, which offers no scheme of human nature. Disconnected notice. In the absence of any essential idea about human nature, this book grants us no greater vision of brotherhood than that which may be found in beings like us who walk, dress, laugh, and eat. There is then no scope for us to imagine ourselves in a world which unifies us in a nature shared in equal parts by all. No glimpses of a human nature or a common law. No, for Montbron, there is nothing beyond the reality in which we subsist with greater or lesser fortune. No way of imagining ourselves beyond this greater or lesser fortune, beyond that simply getting by in life. It may be this renunciation of the humanity which underlines all men that has led his contemporary critics to claim his abhorrence of humanity and to accuse him of misanthropy. But unless I am mistaken, a misanthropist is someone who hates society, but Montbron doesn't. What is interesting is that because he rejects any universal idea of humanity or of humanity's right, Montbron founds his understanding of the human on the fact of going and looking and talking and having adventures with the other. In fact, he is happy to chat away with anyone. And don't presuppose that before anything happens, even before the initial greeting, the person he's going to chat with shares with him a humanity which will be corroborating in what he tells him or otherwise, in what he doesn't know about himself. Yet, we shouldn't permit the charm of the travel to make us unjust. There must be some difference between one man whose only request is to be allowed to live his own life, and another who, while living his own life, is also capable of imagining a world where peace between nations is possible, as well as a system of law which is binding on us all. And in fact, there is a difference. Our international organizations, such as the United Nations, the International Court of Justice, and so on, and all those which are generally considered to be indispensable and in which we find the global justice, are related in some way to the Stoic idea, according to which a state of universal right is perfectly conceivable. A state of universal right which has nothing to do with the right of the inquisitive man which may be claimed from the pages of the Cosmopolitan. The power to organize our world, to solve conflict in a less cruel, more civilized way, has a very big value. Let us be honest. The international law we aspire to is much more than the right of the inquisitive man who asks to be allowed to travel at his own whim. Our cosmopolitanism is tied to a notion of global justice, of being able to make pronouncement and pass judgment in every place, because we have a notion of human rights outside of which we believe there is nothing but inhumanity. Our cosmopolitanism, which began under the conviction that if it were a matter of establishing a universal law and of giving to all an adequate degree of civilization, then so be it, and thus the whole world was inundated with progress, with humanity. I shouldn't be suspect of irony here. It was fine, for example, that no order exists that was different from the one indicated in our Human Rights Charter. And that being the case, it is convenient for that charter to homogenize the whole world, which is no homogeneity anyway beyond the recognition of a conception of human nature, which is really inviolable. But at this point, a question occurs to me. Shall we learn nothing from those on whom we impose our cosmopolitan voice? And if we shall learn something, how shall we learn it? To recast the question in the terms of the context in relation to which it occurs to me, in the face of the recent revolts in North Africa countries, are those events simply an imitation, a desire to achieve what we already have? Is cosmopolitanism simply the assumption that in the last resort we all share more or less the same values which find expression in similar political systems? It may be that the answer to all these questions is simply yes. In the course of the history, cosmopolitanism has been translated into a globalization where all cherish the same aspiration, namely to live in freedom, by which is mean everyone acting according to their wishes without bothering anyone else. We are all in agreement on this point. We all desire the same thing. We all use the same information and communication networks. We all really draw on the same body of important information. We are all citizens of a world which institutes a common citizenship, understood most of the time as a democratic citizenship. Some way or another, the global world has translated cosmopolitanism to a considerable effect. Of course, we have the same nature, that of the free man who aspires to live in a democratic order, which expresses his justice worldwide. If it all really is like that, we should view with suspicion the way cosmopolitanism has established a tremendously one-dimensional world, behind the conviction that there are basic issues on which all human beings agree. Such suspicion is, I think, well-grounded because that conviction underlies a view of the other in which the other is not really different since it merely aspires to live like us. Reading Le Cosmopolite or The Cosmopolitan, I realized that there are three kinds of traveler. There's the one who leaves home and, like a tourist in a seaside town, sees nothing on his trip but his home. He eats the same thing as always, speaks the same language as always, and is sometimes even accompanied by his neighbors. There is too the one who looks at the world without leaving home and finds in that world his home. Much more considerate than the first tourist, this global cosmopolitan is even able to learn some words spoken in the place he travels to and acquire some of the foreign custom. But he does so because he thinks, he thinks that everybody can learn from everyone without having to leave one's town. That if only he had seen that on an interesting TV report, he could have picked up the custom he takes from a foreign country. This is our cosmopolitan. Finally, there is the traveler who on his travels sees different things which make him see the home. Sorry, the time is going out. Finally, there is the traveler who on his travels sees different things which make him see the home he set out from in a different light. Such a traveler is a Fourier de Montbron. Our cosmopolitanism has no need to leave home in order to feel the world is our home, and consequently denies that any differences he happens to find beyond his doorsteps are fundamental. At bottom, all homes are like ours. Of course, there are differences, but they can easily be recognized as non-essential, and we can also recognize that in a nutshell, every single human being is striving to live with the other in a world of freedom, dignity, and recognition. My problem, and I am finishing, my problem is this kind of cosmopolitanism, our cosmopolitanism, is tending to give into oblivion the differences. And maybe you are, when you are eradicating differences, maybe you are eradicating different ways of being human ways. What's the solution? I put the name of Fougeray de Montbron because when I read Fougeray de Montbron, I discovered a man who is not a man until he has learned, he has listened to the other. The other is a value for me. The other is very important for me, not because I learn from the other. The other is important for me because I don't know, I am nothing if not I learned to the other. In the construction of the own identity, it's necessary to listen to the other, to listen to different views. The example is let me an example and I finish. When I was young in the Institut Français in Spain, we learned several things. Well, it's very hard to learn in the culture generally spread in Spain. We learned things that the value of these things is not they are a French concept or French metaphors or French tools. The value is a very important number of young people is forming, is shaping his identity with values which come from France, of course, but the value is not this concept come from France. The value is these concepts are grasped for us and are part of our identity. The cultural cosmopolitanism I try to present here is only the necessity we have to look at the other. It's not a necessity we have to be more to increase our cultural knowledge. No, it's a necessity we have to give shape our own identity. Well, I think the last part of my conference is very compressed, but in a sense, this is what I want to say. It's important to see the other. It's important to spread our culture with the other, but it's not important because, well, you, with this spread out, you know the other. It's important because with this spread out, you know yourself. This is my only. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Pinilla. It was excellent. I think in many ways I could hear echoes of Minister Stikturgic's talk. I mean, from the Minister of Defense to a cultural studies expert. Very much some similar echoes, but from very different vantage points. So thank you very much for that. I'd be happy to take questions, comments for Professor Pinilla regarding his thesis also on cosmopolitanism.
Okay.
Any interventions? Okay, so one. Okay, please. Okay.
Hi, my name is Eva. I'm from Germany. I really enjoyed your talk. Thank you very much. I wanted to. We've talked a lot this morning about the importance of listening, and I think it's very important to understand that listening. Of course, one can have intent to listen, but it's a very hard thing. You really have to work on yourself if you actually want to understand what someone is saying who has a very different background maybe. And I thought your point was very good that our picture of cosmopolitanism has a lot to do with traveling and looking at different places, but maybe that's does not necessarily mean understanding. And we've heard about how important it might be for people to do more listening, but it affects so many people, and there are people that go through so many courses to try to learn how to listen better or to learn better. So what I'm basically trying to say is, what would be your, what ideas would you have? How could that come about, that people that deal with cultural diplomacy actually know how to listen better, maybe if traveling is not the only answer?
I think my question is a question about the fundamentals. Why you need to listen to the other? Why you need the other? And it's a very, well, I realize that's a very philosophical question, but The first step is when the I forget your name. The Selmo, well, he told us, well, it's better a two-way communication. Well, I ask why? Because indeed, in our world, the communication is not is one-dimensional. When you see at the cultural dimensions, you see the same culture. It's terrible. But for instance, in my country, it's more close to me the blues music and the gospel music than the flamenco music. Why? But the question is not why this happens to me. The question is why flamenco music is not in North Carolina, for instance. And, well, perhaps it's a question of, well, it's impossible. But what I am claiming is I need that people in North Carolina feel the necessity, feel the need to another music like flamenco music. Meanwhile, he doesn't know something about flamenco music. The question is why you need the other? Well, perhaps you need the other only because, well, you live with the other and it's a good thing to know better the other. No, you need the other because you need the other in order to say something about you. It's a different way to see culture. For this, we need culture. Culture is not the ways of life of different countries. Culture is the ways of life of different countries that you take and incorporate in your shape. Well, I think more or less.
I would agree with you. There's also the saying that the best way to get to know yourself is through the eyes of someone else. And I think very much it's a similar idea. In the sense, through those interactions, through those traveling, through that movement, we can also better understand our own identities. So to underline your point.
Yes, the question is, well, it's only a question, give reason of why this two ways communication.
Definitely.
This is my point.
Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Julio Pinilla, let's please express our gratitude. Thank you very much. Thank you.